Hi everyone, Mythic Rare here, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up pen pressure and Paint Tool SAI, as well as going over some of the settings that you can use in Paint Tool SAI to do line art. So to get started, you'll need to set up your pen pressure, and you'll go up here to Others, and then go to Options. And then you'll want to be in this menu right here that says Digitizer Support. If it's your first time ever setting up pen pressure, this will be defaulted to 0 and you'll need to change it to 1. This will be defaulted to mouse and you'll need to change it over to pen and click OK. Alright, so I usually see people use these three tools when they're doing their line art, and that would be the brush, which is my personal favorite, followed by pencil and or the line art or line work layer. I won't be going over the line art layers or line work layers in this video, and that is because for me they behave a lot like the pen tools in Photoshop and Illustrator, and if I want to do something really specialized that requires the use of a pen tool, then I'll just hop over to one of those apps and I'll do it in there. But anyways, the pencil and the brush tool pretty much behave the same way as each other. Their looks may vary just depending on the default settings or what settings that you prefer. And since my personal favorite is the brush, I'm just going to leave everything set to the brush and continue from here on out. So for brush, you can kind of see at a glance, well, and pencil as well as the other tools, what your hardness or softness is going to be. So this would be the hardest setting, and then a little bit softer, and the softest. This menu right here contains the blending mode specific to the tool that you have selected. So when it is set to normal, it's just going to pull whatever color is going to show up here, and it's going to show exactly like it is in the swatch. And then vivid and deep, it really just depends on what midtones you're using versus what color is already loaded onto the brush. So depending on what you've got going on in your canvas, if you have this selected to vivid or deep, things may show up like they're very deep in color and they're more jewel tones, where otherwise if things are set to vivid and then you use certain colors or certain tints in the color family, it'll look kind of like things are neon or like they're on luminosity. And then right here is multiply, and what multiply does is it takes like, let's say you have one color, and then when you go over that color with the same color, it creates another version of that color where it is obviously within the same family, but richer and more vibrant, but also a deeper shade as well. So see like how it started out turquoise, and then I just went over like that circle that I made and it just got to a deeper color. And if I continue, then it's gonna go deeper blue, and eventually like it'll go to like a royal blue if I just continue. Alright, so right here we have size, and the size multiplier can affect how big or how small your lines are, just depending on some of your other settings or how you have your pressure sensitivity set up for your tablet. I usually keep mine defaulted to 1, but there's a 0.1 setting, and then there's also a 5 setting. Min size is pretty much what I like to prioritize in terms of how my lines will vary. Starting at 100, it'll be a uniform line with no tapering off at the edges. But then when we move it down to like 50% or so, then that's when you'll see the edges gradually start to taper off. And then when there's 0, the edges of your lines will fall off pretty hard. Alright, so density can be pretty interesting because when everything is set to 100% density, it means that when you use your full pen pressure, you will be getting 100% pigment out of your brush or out of your tool. So, for example, that's 100% pigment of that blue. But then if you go to like around 50%, you can do your full pen pressure with your stylus, but it will only be half the color that was there before. And then you'll have to do multiple passes on that same exact area in order for the color over here to look like the color over here where it's on the full pen pressure and full density. So that can be good if you're wanting to do clothes that have transparency or like they're translucent, or if you're wanting to do sketches and things of that nature and you don't feel like adjusting your opacity on your layer or whatever. And then you guys have probably figured this out. If we turn density down even more, then that line is going to be less visible no matter how much pen pressure you're using. Alright, so what we got going on over here is the different shapes that your brushes can take on, as well as the different textures that can be simulated by our digital canvas. The simple circle means that your brush will always show up in the shape of a circle. Spread and spread with noise basically simulate like a watercolor type of feel. Yeah, because see how the edges of that line get splotchy? It's even more visible on spread with noise. Yeah, so if you want to simulate watercolors, that's how you do it. If you want to simulate oil painting or acrylic painting, you'll want to pick either bristle or flat bristle. Yep. It's not really visible right now, but if we go to a larger one, you can kind of see how it looks like the bristles of a brush. Alright, and then right here is our canvas texture. I have a preference for no texture. Paper textures for me don't really show up or are not really visible, and that could just be the settings that I have for my brushes, but just in my opinion, I don't turn it on. I don't ever really see anything. Yeah, I don't see anything. And then for paper, this can look a little bit interesting because it can kind of simulate you drawing with a colored pencil or a crayon. And then for canvas, you'll get that cross-hatch look like you're painting on a canvas. Blending and dilution, as well as persistence, I do not touch very much, if not at all, when I'm doing line art, and that's because it kind of makes the vibrancy of the colors that you're putting down weaker, and I prefer my line art to be really bold and really strong. And that's because I use the magic wand tool and stuff to do a lot of my selections and to speed up coloring. So that's how come I do not touch those, but I can show you though what blending will do. So for example, we're gonna have a circle, and then we're going to switch on blending. I'll just set it to right there for now, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pick green. Alright, so what blending is going to do is it will take some of this blue and it'll basically transition it to green. So see, even though we have our brushstroke set to green, it's picking up some of that blue and it's transferring that over. So if you're one of those people who prefers to do all of your blending on one layer and or just a few layers, and you don't want to set up multiple layers and all that, this is definitely an option for you for coloring or for shading. Dilution is a little bit interesting because I don't really see that big of an impact on my lines, but at least because my lines are all black and stuff. But for colors though, it really does show up, and you can see that like right here it's very light and it's very pale compared to the richness in color right here. So I guess if you guys want your lines to appear softer and not as strong as some of my lines can be, then that's one way to, I guess, soften your look. And then persistence, I haven't really found it affecting my line art, so I've just set it at a random number and I just kept it there. And then for quality, this kind of determines your brush behavior to a certain extent. I have mine set to smoothest, but you can also set it to track your movements faster, or you can do 2 or 3 to get something in between. Edge hardness, I don't really play with this, but that's because I'm already on the hardest setting right here. If I was on one of these and I wanted my lines to be a little bit harder, then I would just kind of play with this to try and find that exact perfect look that I want to achieve. Minimum density can be a little bit interesting, and that's because it kind of determines how much pigment is going to be on the ends of your lines when you don't have as much pen pressure. So what it's going to look like will be at least 32% of your pigment on the lightest part of your line at all times, regardless of the density setting right here. Or it'll be 30%, 40%, or whatever percentage of density you have right here, up here on the tiniest part of your line. And then maximum density persistence, I don't really touch that. I know that I prefer a higher density, so I have this set higher and I leave it. And then the same thing too with hard versus soft. I've played with this setting quite a bit and I haven't really noticed a difference if I drag it all the way to the left or drag it all the way over to the right. But then again, I probably have some other settings already compensating for that. So for me, I can just leave it as it is and it doesn't really affect me, but you may want to try playing around with that if you can't really get your lines to look the way that you want them to look. Okay, so density, size, and blending, I make sure that all of these are checked, because if you uncheck them, you see how some of your functionality goes away. Yeah, that's why I always try to keep mine checked. This right here, it's pretty obvious, but this is all the various sizes of your brushes, so you can just click on whatever pixel diameter you want and you're good to go. I really like the fact that you can get in between sizes for brushes. That is flexibility that Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator just doesn't really offer, at least not up front anyways. But at the same time though, this can be really limited because our maximum diameter is 500 pixels, and I know that with Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator I can easily get a few thousand. There are a couple more things that I want to go over. Up here is your undo button, so if you're ever sleep deprived or you just whatever you forget, you can always go up here and undo, or click the forward one and it'll do redo, or there's always the good old Control Z on the keyboard. And then right here we have our zoom settings. So right now this is zoomed in at 150%, but you can just do the down arrow and then you've got some selected percentages that you can zoom in or zoom out to, and then zoom in and zoom out are up here as well. And then the stop brings everything back to the default zoom. You can also do Control plus or Control minus on the keyboard if you like using the keyboard as well. Alright, so right here we have our rotation settings for the canvas, and rotation can be pretty important on your canvas because if you're tracing line art and you're struggling to get all of your line work to match up on your drawing, then sometimes you may have to put your wrist in a funky position or your arm in a weird position or your hand gets cramped, something, because you're not wanting to rotate your canvas. So rotating your canvas can not only help you achieve or do more difficult line art, but also it'll take a lot of stress off of your hands and your tendons. So right here you have a drop down menu, and then you can go either clockwise or counterclockwise at 45-degree intervals. Plus will always be clockwise or to the right, and then minus will always be counterclockwise or to the left. And then you also have the buttons that do it right here, as well as the default or reset. I think this is a little bit old school for Paint Tool SCI, because on a lot of graphics tablets that have been made within the last 5 years or so, or even earlier, they'll have a button, or they'll have a button or a couple of buttons that you can press, and it'll pull up a menu on your screen, and you'll just toggle your canvas rotation on, and then you'll have like a touch sensitive strip off to the side, or maybe some other buttons that will rotate the canvas clockwise or counterclockwise for you. And at least the 1.x versions of Paint Tool SCI will not have that functionality, so it's a little bit old school. It doesn't really hinder me too much, but going forward, I would like to see that functionality where it will auto rotate with the help of your tablet, kind of like Photoshop and Illustrator do. Right here we have our ability to flip our canvas. So if you're wanting to check for the symmetricalness of a face, or if you can't decide that you want a character to face one way or face another way, you can just toggle this. and it'll flip your drawing over. Alright, up here we have the stabilizer in various versions of Paint Tool SAI, and then in Photoshop it will be called smoothing. But essentially they are one and the same. Usually it'll come to 0, or it'll default to 0 when you first get Paint Tool SAI, and a stabilizer on 0 means that it'll pick up like all the little movements and shakes and stuff in your hand, and that doesn't really look good when you're trying to have those crisp, clean lines for line art. So you have quite a few options here, one all the way up through S7 when you activate your stabilizer, and my personal preference is 10. I can get pretty smooth, pretty clean lines on 10. And the numbers 1 through S7 is pretty much the level that your computer is having to compensate for you so that you will have the smoothest possible lines. So if you are like super hyped up on coffee and you can't stop shaking, or if you're brand new with a tablet and you haven't drawn in a while and you don't have a steady hand for whatever reason, you may want to turn it up to 15 or S1 depending on what your computer system can handle. My personal preference is 10. I actually started out at 15 and at S1, and I just, as time went on and I got more practiced, I am just able to keep my stabilizer down at around a 10. I could probably get away with the 5 if I really wanted to, but I figure, everything looks nice and pretty on a 10, so I'm just going to keep it at 10. For the S1 through S7, it's kind of like precision mode. And so what that means is the brush will follow your hand slower, but it will get everything 100% pixel perfect with the line. See how there was a slight bit of lag there compared to when I was drawing earlier, and then there's going to be even more lag, and then it's going to really lag when you do S7. So just depending on what your system can handle, if you're doing more complicated line art and you do need that extra bit of precision, that's when you can go to your S settings in your stabilizer, but I highly do not recommend drawing on S7 because it just lags a lot. And then depending on what type of hardware you've got, or if you're doing other things that may require some RAM or some other system resources, then that may lag for you even more. But a lot of tablets also come with a built-in precision mode, so you don't have to turn it to the S settings if you don't want to. If your tablet already has precision mode, you can just have that set up, and then you can take care of any precise things that way. Well, that just about covers everything that I wanted to show you guys. I wanted to do some speed paints of myself doing line art after this video, but it's just going to turn out to be way too long, so it'll be its own separate video. Anyways, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and see you later. Bye!